All right, welcome to today's lesson on multiplying fractions. Our learning intention by the end is to be able to multiply fractions, and we're going to add the word fluently in here. All right, now this lesson serves as a bit of a reminder before we move into algebraic fractions. So if you've done this in primary school, hopefully you remember it. If you haven't done it in primary school, hopefully you can learn on as we go. So the first question we're going to look at is 1/2 of 2/3. And I'm going to draw a picture and demonstrate how this works, and then I'm going to show you how to do it on paper. All right, so 1/2 of 2/3. So this is what we start with, 2/3. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, chop it up into 3. I'm going to shade 2 of those 3. So that's 2/3. Now, we'll zoom in, and it says, the problem says to take 1/2 of those 2/3. So if I chop those 2/3 up into half, I'm going to do it the opposite direction. So you can see here that I'm chopping the entire shape up into halves. I'm taking one of those halves in here. All right, so 1/2 is anything above or below the purple line. Now we're ignoring this because that's not part of the original 2/3. So here's a half and here's a half, and together they make 2/3. All right, so I'm going to shade in half of the 2/3, which is above the purple line. So you can see I've got 2 parts out of, and I count the whole shape here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've just chosen 2 parts out of 6. Now 2 parts out of 6, you might remember from simplifying, we can divide both of those numbers by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 2 out of 6 is the same as 1 out of 3. Now, if you look back at this 2/3 picture, and I'll draw it again so that you can see the process. All right, so 2/3 was there. I chose to chop it up into halves across this way. If I'd chosen to chop it up into halves down here, you would have seen that that was one of the halves, which was the same as 1/3. So the way we chop it up helps us picture it, but it always gets us to the right answer if we chop it up different ways. So to do it on paper, we would go 1/2, we'd replace the of with a multiply sign, and then we go 2/3. Once we get to this point, we just multiply numerators with numerators, denominators with denominators, which will give us 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 3 is 6. So you can see we're back at this point here, 2 over 6, which we then simplify by dividing both by 2, and we get the final answer of 1/3. All right. This picture is really helpful, but not all problems will be able to have a picture drawn easily or to make sense of it. So don't get hung up on that. Another example we can look at here is 2/5 of 3/7. So this is an example of a question where the picture doesn't make a lot of sense. If we were to find 3/7 of this picture, we would chop this rectangle up into 7, which would look something like this. They're not very good sevenths. Then I would find 2/5 of them, and I would chop the shape up into fifths horizontally, which looks like this. And then I would take 2 of those fifths. Actually, sorry, I forgot to shade the 3/7. So the sevenths go down. So there's 1/7, 2/7, 3/7, and then I would take 2 of those fifths in the sevenths, so they go across. So there's 1 there and 2 there. So you can see that I've shaded, or double shaded with the black and the green, 6 out of all of them, which is 35. So I've shaded, double shaded, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of the entire shape, which is 35. And the way we get there on paper, you might be able to see it, is to replace the multiply, the of word with a multiply sign, multiply numerators and denominators, and we get 6 over 35. All right, now 6 and 35 don't share any common factors, So this one is the final answer. You don't need to simplify it. All right, so this picture doesn't make a lot of sense, but hopefully this process does. All right, so in your books, you might want to write down the steps. So we multiply, I'll just say top and bottom by top and bottom, and then we simplify if possible. All right, so those are the steps you take to answer questions like this. Hopefully you've got a bit of a refresher or learned something new. Otherwise, go and give it a practice in your book.